Boker Tov, Givrin.
Boker Tov.
Ma Shlomchem.
Tov.
Oh, it's getting better and better and better. Pretty soon you'll have to say Tov Me'od. Everyone? Tov Me'od. Again. Tov Me'od. That means very good. All right? Yes, Kyle?
How do you say okay?
Just Tov.
Okay.
Tov serves for okay as well as... there is another way to say it. And that is literally to say not bad. Not bad is a way to say I'm not good, but I'm not bad either. So it's in between. It's kind of okay. It's this way. So that's say lo ra. Lo ra. Okay? So now I'll probably get 2 or 3 different answers at the same time, now that all of you know enough Hebrew to be honest. All right? Some of you can say ra, some of you can say tov, some of you can say lo ra. I don't know if there's anyone who will say, there should be someone say tov ma'od. I don't know if there's anyone who say ra ma'od. Very bad. Hope that doesn't happen. Okay, the first thing we want to do today is look at the vocabulary for next Tuesday. Let's turn to chapters 10 and 11 in the textbook and go over the vocabulary. And we'll start at the upper right-hand corner. This is page 75, I believe, in your textbook there. I have a little bit different edition here, but I think that's still the same page. Start at the upper right-hand corner. Who? That in this place is the word that, the demonstrative pronoun. Who is also he. All right? It's got 2 different translations. It's the same word. And so it depends on context. But in this particular lesson, in chapter 10, you're learning about demonstrative pronouns. So the third masculine singular demonstrative pronoun, that, as in that man, is who. And if you say that woman, it's the next word, he. Okay? Everyone say he. All right? And if you're going to talk about those, the plural men, those men, it's haim or hema. All right? This is zeh. That's this masculine singular. The feminine is zot. And we've already had those. And do you still have ele there in the vocabulary, or was it removed? It's removed because it was used before, and we left it out of there. We might be putting that back in, however, because it fits here overall. All right? Those feminine, those women, is hain and haina. Malay. Malay means he was full or he filled. Ra means bad or evil. When we talked about Ra earlier, that's because we're speaking modern Hebrew. When I greet you, Boker Tov, and I say Boker Tov Givrin, that is modern Hebrew. Givrin would not be used in biblical Hebrew. Instead, it would be usually word ishim, or it could be another word being used for that. All right. The next word on the 4th line down is toledot. It means descendants in the sense of a line of descendants. It can mean generation, and it can also be taken as a history. Tzaddik means innocent, just, right, or righteous. Edah means assembly, congregation, or gathering. All right, any questions on the vocabulary there at the end of chapter 10? Okay, and I don't have those down here. So which ones do you have? I can pull them up on the screen there on the computer. Okay, good. Let's go over those. Thank you. This is what I get for having an older copy. I didn't go over to the book shack and buy a new one. All right. In place where we used to have Elah, we substituted now there Ashur. Notice the dogish in the sheen? It's doubled. So it's Ashur. All right, everyone? Ashur. And then the last line is El Shaddai. That is El Shaddai, as you've learned it. And it also means God Almighty. God Almighty. Sham means there. Remember, shame meant what? Name. Shame is name, sham is there. Atah. Atah means now. Please get in the habit of never using the English word now to translate anything in Hebrew except for atah. Okay? Because in English we tend to use now in a logical sense as well as a temporal sense. Now in the temporal means right now, this minute, presently. All right? And that's what atah means. Now, when you say now, I would like to say something to you. You don't know except by context whether I mean that presently or whether I'm using that in a logical sense, reaching a conclusion. So, therefore, now. Don't ever use now in the logical sense in translating the Hebrew. Okay, just to keep it clear. And part of that is to train you in how to do translation that is less ambiguous than normal translations. So reserve the word now for atah, and it will serve you very well in the coming semesters of Hebrew. Jeff? Yes.
We need the parentheses around line when we put line of descendants.
If you put line there, yes.
But generations, we can just put generations.
You could put generations, right? And you could also just put descendants. Yes. Okay. Let's turn to the end of chapter 11 and take a look at the vocabulary there. Page 83. Start at the upper right. Navi. Navi means prophet. You should be familiar by now that the Hebrew Bible is often called the Tanakh. And you'll see this written in various ways. You'll see it written this way. You'll see it written this way. You'll see it sometimes with an H on the end of it. And that stands for words that begin with a tau, a nun, and a kaf. All right? The word that begins with the tau is Torah. All right? What does it mean? Law. And this stands for Nevi'im. Should spell that correctly here. Nevi'im, which is the word for prophets. And then this is standing for the Ketuvim, which literally means those things which were written, the writings. So when you talk about the Hebrew Bible as the Tanakh, which the Jewish people love to use, you'll see the Jewish Publication Society's Bible translation is called the Tanakh. And so it's the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, the law, the prophets, and the writings, the three major divisions of the Hebrew Bible. So Navi is the singular of Nevi'im. All right, Navi, prophet. The second word is Olam. Olam can mean eternity, but it can also just mean a long time. It doesn't have to mean forever. It doesn't have to mean eternity. La'ad, or excuse me, let's get the pronunciation correct on that. It's La'ad.
La'ad.
La'ad means forever. Now, Olam can mean forever. La'ad can mean forever. Chazak.
Chazak.
He was strong. Did you get the guttural in there? I didn't hear enough there. Didn't see enough spit fly. Chazak.
Chazak.
He was strong. Milchama.
Milchama.
I heard the guttural that time. Battle or war. It almost sounds like it, doesn't it? And then eitz. Eitz is tree or wood. Normally, the singular means tree, and the plural, eitzim, means wood or pieces of wood. All right? The third line, yir'ah. Yir'ah. Yir'ah means fear. Chatat. Sin or sin offering. Makom. Means place. It's from the root kum. What does kum mean? To stand. So if you have a place where someone stands, that is the place. Where someone stands is the place. So makom is built on stand. All right, makom just has a prefix, a mem and a kametz prefix, and added to the root kum. Makom means place. Zakar means he remembered. Tahor means clean, pure, or genuine. Savav, he surrounded. What's the word related to that we've already had? Saviv. Saviv means what? Surrounding, around. Okay. Savav is the verb. Saviv is the preposition. Zavach. He sacrificed. Zevach. That's the noun. Sacrifice. And here's another noun built on that. The place where you sacrifice is mitzbeach. Notice the pathek furtive there, pronounced before the chaf. Let's say that one again. Mitzbeach. Emet. Truth. Amad. He stood. Now notice that kum was to stand. Amad, he stood. These two verbs can have the same identical meaning depending on being used in certain contexts. So they can be synonyms. They can be synonyms. The difference is that amad is the idea of someone standing who's already standing up. Kum is someone who stands up because he was not previously standing. Kesef means silver. What was the word for gold? Zahav. So gold is zahav, silver is kesef. Kesef can also be used for money because silver pieces were used for exchange. Mishpat means judgment or justice. Yachdao means together, can also mean equally or altogether or entirely. This is determined totally by context. Tzadak. He was right, or he was in the right, or he was just, or he was righteous. This is the verb for the adjective. What was the adjective we had? Tzaddik. We had that in the vocabulary for chapter 10. All right, any questions on the vocabulary here? Oh, there's more again? 6 more? All right. This is the first time my textbook has not had all the vocabulary, so I've got to get used to that. Probably ought to get it replaced here. All right, we have dog. It's not a canine. All right, this is a fish. Fish. Dog is fish. So who is he? He is she, me is who, and dog is fish. And no, there is no Hebrew word fish that could mean dog, because the word dog is kelev. All right, dog is fish. Therefore is alkane. Tehom. Tehom means deep. It's a reference to the primeval ocean, Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. And darkness, wechoshek, was upon the surface, al panei, of the deep. Tehom. Tehom. All right? And by the way, on dog, if it's a masculine fish, it's dog. If it's a feminine fish, it's daga. That's the reason you have a second form there. Gibor. Gibor means a hero, a mighty man, a warrior. It's related to the word I used to greet you this morning. When I say Boker Tov Givrin, Givrin is the Aramaic plural form of Gever, and Gever and Gibor are from exactly the same root. Gaver, which means to be mighty, to be strong, to prevail, to be victorious. Okay, Gibor. Kikar. Kikar is the idea of environs, a circuit. When you refer to in the Hebrew to the Jordan Valley, oftentimes it's not referred to as the valley, it's referred to as the Jordan region, and Kikar is what is used for that. The broad southern portion of the Jordan Valley is specifically referred to as the Kikar, HaKikar, what is also known as the Gore region. Nothing to do with Al Gore. And please make a correction there, the typo. That should be the Jordan Valley, not he, Jordan Valley. Me'ayin. Me'ayin is a combination of min, from, and ayin, which you've learned in the construct form ain, meaning there is not, but it also is a synonym, actually a homonym for a word that has exactly the same pronunciation, ayin, which means where. And so this means from where when you put it together. Any questions on the vocabulary? Yes, Kyle.
Gibor, is that the word used whenever in the, kind of the Old Testament they talk about men of valor, that sort of thing?
Men of valor is actually another word. And let me write that up here on the board for you. Men of valor is usually anshe. And what have we learned about the tsara yod ending? No, someone else said it back here. David has it. It's construct. It's the masculine plural construct. Keep that in mind, because when you have the tsara yod 96% of the time or more, that is the symbol that you have a masculine plural construct. Remember what we mean by construct? What's the construct indicate? Genitive, of. So this is from actually the word enosh, and it's also considered the plural form, the proper plural form for ish, man or man. And so anshe means the men of, all right? So the men of valor is normally the word here, chayil, anshe chayil. And chayil is the word that's used for valor there. It's used for that which has success, that which has power, that which has influence. It is a word that is used of wealth. It's a word that is also used of virtue. The virtuous woman in Proverbs chapter 30 there at the or 31 at the end, the last 22 verses. Chayil is the word that is used to describe the virtuous woman as well. So it has many different meanings, but that would be men of valor rather than gibor. But having said that, when you have anshe chayil, if you were to give a synonym or a Hebrew equivalent, gibor would be very close. Okay? It's just that gibor isn't used in that phrase in the Old Testament. All right? Any other questions? Yes, Scott?
Regarding Toledo in chapter 10,
Yes.
it looks like that's a plural form.
It is.
And so is there a singular descendant?
No.
And would generation be singular or plural?
No, Toledo is used for all of the above. There is no other form. And if you'll notice there is a asterisk and a footnote there to tell you that that exact form, toladot, does not occur in the Old Testament. And it occurs 11 times in the book of Genesis, divides up the book of Genesis into its parts. It's a major term for the structure of the book of Genesis. But we don't have the absolute form of it. Is never used in the Old Testament, and no singular form is ever used. In fact, as far as we know, it's one of those words that is irregular, and that is the only form that was ever used, whether you're talking about singular or plural. Okay? And normally when you're going to talk about an individual being a descendant, you would use zerah, seed, for that. Toldot's never used for a singular descendant. It's usually a line of descendants or descendants as a line, a generation, or a history. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, one other thing to take care of. The other day when we were talking about the word hakam for wisdom, and we're talking about inflecting this word to go to a form that would be the feminine singular adjective. I had told you at the time that it could take this form. So I thought that I would go and locate the exact reference in the Hebrew Bible where that form is found, because I was certain I could find it quite readily and easily. I thought it occurred twice out of the 138 occurrences. after looking at all 138 occurrences, I did not find it, which has really got me stymied. So I picked up one of the reference grammars and looked at their description and discussion, and they mentioned the fact that sometimes the hatef disappears under the chayth, and that it occurs, instead of having the hatef pathak, that occurs as a simple schwa, but they too did not give any particular reference. In fact, all the examples they gave were verb forms. None of them were nouns or adjectives. And so then I went to my concordance just to look through the concordance at all the words beginning with chayth that are nouns, because I was just positive. And one of these days I may even find where it is, I remember it. And it may not be chakam at all. But I could not find it. So I stand corrected. There is no alternate form. The feminine form, in fact, all the inflected forms of chakam, all 138 occurrences of chakam, of which I think about probably 80 some are inflected, have various endings, feminine, singular, feminine, plural, masculine, plural, etc. I could not find a single case where a simple schwa occurred. So I wanted to correct that in your thinking at this point. And just remind you that yes, somewhere there are chayths that have a schwa instead of a hatef pathic, but not on this word. Okay? All right? So I want to always clarify those. And sometimes my memory doesn't serve me exactly as I wish it would. And sometimes I can't find something at the time I go to look for them. And I use the computer, and I use the hard concordance, and I use the lexicon, I use the grammars, and could not come up with it. And I was certain there was one there. So if in the future I happen to run across it, I'll come back in and recorrect myself again. But for the time being, if I do this much research on it and can't find it, it's probably not going to be found. It's probably some other word that I was thinking about, and we'll find that eventually. Any other questions on that before we go back to our review of the construct and then go to today's lesson on personal pronouns? Okay, let's go back and review the construct state again then. And the construct is chapter 11. And I might have you take a look there at chapter 11, if you would please, at the first page. We have not gone over the exegetical insights on previous chapters. I've left that for your personal reading because I want to emphasize more our getting into the grammar adequately. But we've got enough base behind us now on these matters, and you also have enough knowledge of the Hebrew. And we have small enough bites of information to handle from now on that I intend for us to look at an exegetical insight every class time. So this one is Psalm 19:10. And as you look at that, notice you have yirat. Yirat is the feminine construct of the vocabulary word we just read at the end of chapter 11. Yir'ah. Yir'ah means fear, so yirat means fear of. Right after that, we have the proper name of God, Yahweh. Yahweh. So as we look at that, you have Yirat Yahweh is the fear of Yahweh. Now we translate it the fear for what reason? Anyone? Yahweh is a proper name, therefore definite. In the construct relationship between nouns, if the last noun is definite, then all the nouns connected to it by the construct also are definite. So it's the fear of Yahweh. It's not a fear of Yahweh, okay? The fear of Yahweh, tehorah. We just had that. We had tahor. Tahor means pure or clean. Tehorah is the feminine singular of that adjective, okay? So what do we have in the context that this feminine adjective can modify? We've had three words. Is Yahweh feminine? No. That leaves only one other word. What is it? Fear. Yir'ah is feminine. That's why it has a feminine singular construct ending. Yir'at. So as we're looking at that and understand that, then it's the fear of the Lord is clean Because remember, predicate adjectives do not take the article. Now you can point out that yirath doesn't have the article, but it does have the article according to the grammar, because it is in construct with a definite noun. So it's the fear of Yahweh. If it was to say the clean fear of Yahweh, then it'd have to be yirath Yahweh hat tehorah. It'd have to be an article on this if it's an attributive adjective. The clean fear of Yahweh, because it has to agree with the noun it modifies in definiteness as well as gender and number. And yirat is definite because it's in construct with a definite noun. Okay, does everyone understand that? It's a very important point to remember. It affects your translation. It affects your understanding of what's being said here. It affects how you understand tehorah. Chad?
I was under the impression that predicate adjectives appeared before the noun.
They normally appear before. Normally is the operative word. All right? When they don't appear first, it's because there's emphasis on what does appear first. Okay, and in this case, the emphasis then is on the fear of Yahweh. Yes?
Is it true that attributive adjectives can never appear before?
Attributive adjectives never appear before a noun. They always follow the noun they modify. Okay, John?
When you say there's emphasis on a word, does that not change anything in how we translate it? It's just for our understanding.
It may not change how you translate. It could in some cases, but it does affect your understanding and interpretation of the passage. Okay? All right? And the reason Yirat Yahweh is emphasized here is in this context, we're talking about various terms describing the Word of God, and the Word of God is the focus, not the characteristics of the Word of God. And so that's why the characteristic follows here, that's predicated of the fear of Yahweh. And the fear of Yahweh is another title here of the Word of God by context. Okay, then we have Omedeth. Omedeth, we have not reached the point where we're talking about participles, but this is actually a participle, and it's from Ahmad. We just had Ahmad as a vocabulary word. He stood. Omedeth is standing. La'ad we had as a vocabulary word. What did it mean? We just went over it. La'ad. Parallel to olam. Eternal, forever. Forever. So the fear of Yahweh is clean, standing forever. Standing forever. Mishpatei Yahweh. What do we know about Mishpatei? It's in construct. Notice the tsere yod ending. All right? So it's a masculine plural construct. Mishpat means judgment. So this is judgments of Yahweh. The judgments of Yahweh, because remember, Yahweh is a definite noun. Therefore, the noun joined to it in construct becomes definite, because the article can never be written on that first noun. The Hebrew does not allow the written article on the first noun, the noun that is in construct. Okay? So you have to supply it from the words that follow. And so Yahweh is definite, therefore Mishpatei is definite. The judgments of Yahweh. And then emet is the adjective true in this case, instead of just truth, the noun. So emet means true. It does not have the article. Therefore it is a predicate adjective, just like tehorah. So the judgments of Yahweh are true. Tzadku. Tzadku is a verb. So we haven't gotten to that yet. It means, tzadak means he was righteous. So here it's they were righteous. They refers to the judgments. They are righteous. Yachdau. Yachdau means altogether, or any number of other different meanings, equally, etc. And we're not going to discuss all those meanings and what this particular verse means today, because we'll talk about it in detail in your third semester of Hebrew, when we go through the entirety of Psalm 19 and you translate Psalm 19. So you've got a head start on the third semester of Hebrew translation, all right? You have 14 verses to translate there, and here's verse number 10 is already done for you a year in advance. All right? So the fear of Yahweh is clean, standing forever. The judgments of Yahweh are true. They are righteous altogether. And we'll talk about what that actually means in the third semester. Do you understand here what's happened as we've gone through, and you see how the construct state works and why we've used it? And as you look at this text and you study it out in the Hebrew, it becomes very, very significant and important. This is a verse that talks about sanctification in the Old Testament. And I'll just give you a preview of what you'll learn in the third semester. That this word sadku has the idea of it makes righteous completely. The Word of God makes completely righteous. And this rounds out the description of the Word of God in verses 7 through 10 in the Hebrew text about the Word of God. And it is the Word which saves and sanctifies, is the message in Psalm 19. Fascinating book, fascinating chapter. Okay? All right. Let's now go to the construct state and review here. Remember, when you have two or more words, the words are going to be nouns. There's possibility. The reason I have words up here is to be overly cautious in how I state it. Why? Because it's not just nouns that this can occur with. It can occur with participles behaving like nouns. It can occur with adjectives behaving like nouns. Okay? So it'll always be behaving as nouns. Two or more words, whether nouns, participles, or adjectives, that are behaving as nouns, connected in a genitive relationship. They form one compound idea. One compound idea. And that it is such a united concept and idea that in the Hebrew language, they are pronounced as one word. They are pronounced as one word. Noun number one, the first noun, as we had there in Yirath Yahweh, the fear of Yahweh, is called the construct. Yirath is the construct. Why? Because it undergoes construction. It is inflected. It is changed. Yirah is the absolute form, fear. Yirath is the constructed form, changed in the comments, hey, at the end, to a pathic tau, so that it says fear of. Mishpatim is the absolute form of judgments, masculine plural. Mishpate, you drop the mem sophit, you change the hirik yod to a tseri yod, it is constructed so that you have then the genitive. So that's why the first noun is called the construct noun. All right? The entire chain of relationship between the two is called the construct relationship. But the noun that is changed is the construct. And the second noun is called the genitive. The genitive. It's the one that's of something. And it is in the absolute form. It is not constructed. It's in the absolute form. So if you had the fear of judgments, it'd be Yirath Mishpatim. You see? It'd be the unconstructed. Wouldn't go to Mishpate. It's not Yirath Mishpate, because that would be fear of judgments of something else. You'd have another of after that. So the first word is the pre-genitive, the second one is the genitive, or the first word is the construct, the second word is the genitive, or look at the first as the construct and the second as the absolute. And that does not exhaust all the terms that are used in the Hebrew grammars. There are at least 6 or 7 different sets of terms that are used to describe this relationship and the two nouns that are involved in it. Modern Hebrew itself uses 2 different sets of Hebrew words to describe the relationship and the nouns involved. And in English, we use quite a number ourselves. And I've just given you 2 sets here. Construct and genitive, pre-genitive and absolute, or pre-genitive, genitive, construct, and absolute. And if you count all the different ways that can be done, it's more than 2. All right, let's go further. The example we looked at, divrei ha'am. Notice that divrei is constructed. You have the tseri yod. That's your clue that tseri yod is there. Now, notice that there's an accent there. Notice the accent is angled to the left. It's angled to the left, starting from the top going down. That little line next to the tsere. That is a conjunctive accent. A conjunctive accent. If you have the same accent and it's turned back the other way, this way, that is a disjunctive accent. So when we turn it this way, it is conjunctive. And the noun in construct always has a conjunctive accent with it if an accent is on it. It never takes a disjunctive accent. It's always conjunctive. In other words, it is the way the Maastrichts are saying this word must be joined with the following word. And they're telling you that in that then you have the potential of a construct state. And that's done in order to take care of words where you do not have an inflection that is peculiarly the construct. Like you have the tsere yod is very obviously construct. The ath is very obviously construct. But in the masculine singular you don't have an obvious form. And in the feminine plural you don't have an obvious form. And so you just go by context and you go by whether or not there's a conjunctive accent on the first word. So divrei is words and ha'am is of the people. The construct plus the absolute. The pre-genitive, divrei, and the genitive of the people, ha'am. Okay? The words of the people. Construct and genitive. This is from Exodus 19:8. The words of the people. Okay? Then next, we take a look at devar. Notice the conjunctive accent again. Notice the makef used. Please do not interpret the makef as a sign of the genitive or a sign of the construct. Many beginning Hebrew students, in fact, unfortunately, some Hebrew professors teach that the makef is the sign of the construct. It is not. Because the makef can be used between two verbs. The makef can be used between any words. The makef can be used between an adverb like the negative lo, not, and an imperative, or it'd be actually an imperfect form of the verb following it. The makef is nothing more than a signal that the words it connects are to be pronounced as one word. That is the only thing it serves for. Now it just happens to be that in the construct state, the words are also pronounced as one word. So therefore, we would fully expect that from time to time, at least, we might have the makef show up, since it serves the same function about pronunciation. But it's only about pronunciation. If you start interpreting the makef as a sign of the construct relationship, then you'll be interpreting construct relationships where they do not exist at all. All right? So just remember, the makef only indicates when words that it connects are to be pronounced as one word. Jeff?
Would the makef ever be between two nouns that aren't?
Yes, it will. It can be between any two words that aren't in construct. It's used in many, many situations. It's not even, you can't even statistically say a majority of the time it occurs between construct nouns. It's not even that close. Okay? So devar Yahweh means the word of Yahweh. The word of Yahweh, the word of the Lord. Genesis 15:1. Any questions on that? Is that clear, what we're doing here? And here we have the masculine plural, divrei, and the masculine singular, devar. Notice that devar has changed its pointing, and why does it change its pointing? Not just because it's construct. Because it's pronounced together with the following word. Notice whether or not it has the makef. Because construct is always pronounced together with the following word as one word. That extends that word's syllables. And so like on ha'am, you have two syllables already. And if you have the third syllable back and you add it on, it has to be changed in some way. Now we have it changed here in divrei because ray is changed. But even back further, you have to shorten it too. And then we look at devar. On Yahweh, you have two syllables, Yahweh. Remember, we don't take the syllabification here of the schwa in the comments. That is for Adonai, just a clue to pronounce it as Adonai. But Yahweh is 2 syllables, and then you have davar, 3rd syllable back, you had davar originally. And let's put that up here on the board so I can walk you through it and help you visualize it, because some of you are visual learners, and that's the way I am too. I'm a visual learner. So we have, let's put it just the way it would possibly look here, and let's put Yahweh here, and I'm going to leave the vowels off, because remember, the vowels that are printed in the biblical text have nothing to do with the name Yahweh. It has everything to do with the word that is pronounced in place of Yahweh, Adonai. So let's take a look at here and see how we work this. So if we have Yahweh, that's 2 different words, or 2 different syllables, excuse me, and I'll put the pronunciation here this way so we can see it, the proper pronunciation, Yahweh. So we have a syllable. We have syllable number 1, we have syllable number 2, and now this is syllable number 3 back from it. So if we're going to put these in construct with each other, construct relationship, pronounce them as one word, we cannot retain the pronunciation davar Yahweh. First of all, it's davar because you have an accent on davar. It is a word that has its accent on the last syllable, which is the normal syllable for accents. But is no longer going to be treated as a separate word. It is part of the following, forming one word together. So the accent is on the A, Yahweh. So this accent here has to disappear. So it's no longer davar Yahweh, it's going to be davar Yahweh. And to do that then, the Hebrew shortens this and changes it to a pathak. It shortens it. And it shortens it only to a pathak instead of going all the way to a schwa, because you still have another syllable out here that has to be changed, and it is going to go to a schwa, the shortest possible way of shortening it. And you cannot have 2 schwas together at the beginning of a word. And so this will remain the pathak then, which is the lowest possible form, because it can't go all the way back to a schwa, because you can't have 2 schwas at the beginning of the word. You say, why couldn't they do it the other way around and put the pathak here and put the schwa here? Because that reverses the nature of the word with its normal accent. It's normally accented on the last syllable. Therefore, the last syllable is the most important syllable. The most important syllable is the one that will be given preference for having a full vowel rather than the half vowel. And so the pathak remains here, and this one, which is not accented at all, even in normal pronunciation, loses the sound altogether. Yes, David?
So are there words that are connected by a makif that are not in construct but still...
Yes, let me repeat that. I've said it 3 times this morning. I'll say it a 4th time. And it's not the last time I'll say it, today or in the coming weeks, all right? And the reason is because too many students don't catch that point. Makif only and always serves only to indicate the 2 words it connects are to be pronounced together as one word. It is never the symbol or sign of anything else.
So when some of the words have 3 or more syllables, and regardless of whether that's in the construct, we will see these vowel pointings changing?
Yes. Right. If it's in construct, you're going to see the vowels changing because it's constructed.
But if it's not in construct?
If it's not in construct, you're not going to see it change.
Okay.
Unless you have a makif saying it's to be pronounced as one word, then they can change. But the makif is not a symbol of genitive or the construct state. Yes, Scott.
I apologize if I missed this, but in this case, is it just the accent that tips us off that this isn't?
Absolutely not. You've got the vowel pointings that tip you off. You know the vocabulary word is davar. It has 2 commences. And to see it here with a schwa and a pathik tells you right away it's been constructed.
But the makif is there, so it would change.
It may not always be there. It's not always there.
But in this case, since it is, the vowel pointings would already be changed, so how would we know that they're not changed because of that?
It's a good question. Let me see if I can answer that in a clear fashion. When the makif is used to indicate 2 words to be pronounced together, when those two words are nouns and you have the first noun has changeable vowels, they don't all have changeable vowels. In those cases, it will normally indicate a construct, but it's not the makef indicating it. All right? Because you can have this exact same phrase that you have Devar Yahweh with the makef, you can have it like this without the makef. It does not have to have the makef.
And then we would definitely know.
You'll know anyway. Anytime you have a noun's vowels change, it is going to be construct. Okay? All right? Yes?
In the construct, would always have the conjunctive accent?
Will it always have the conjunctive accent? No. When it has an accent, it will be a conjunctive accent. Okay? Good question, John. All right? Yes, Roger?
What is the purpose of conjunctive accent in this case?
In this case, it just merely confirms. It wasn't necessary, but they use it anyway. Sometimes there's what we would term a superfluous use, as in this case. If you have a makef, you really don't need it, but they used it anyway. Okay? Thank you, Roger. All right, let's go on to the next. We've had the masculine. Let's take a look at the next one. Remember when we looked at this one, it helped you to realize that you can have a series of constructs. We call this a construct chain. The normal construct chain is just two nouns. But you can have a construct name. This is the longest construct chain, I believe, in the Old Testament. And here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 construct nouns attached to one absolute noun. So it's and the remainder of the number of the bowmen, actually the bow of the mighty men, that's Gibor, the mighty men of the sons of Kedar. And since Kedar is a proper noun, it is definite. Therefore, all the nouns in construct relationship in the chain are considered definite. So it's the remainder of the number of the bows of the men of the sons of Kedar. All right? And notice as you looked at this, you have Sha'ar. If you knew the actual form of the lexical entry for this, the lexicon's entry, you know that this is constructed. It's changed its vowels. So you know that it is in construct. Plus you have a conjunctive accent next to it that tells you that it's in construct. Mispar has been changed because it's normally mispar. Plus it's joined by the makef to keshet. Keshet never changes its vowels. Never changes its vowels. Segolate nouns do not change their vowels in the singular, masculine singular. So there's no indication here except for a conjunctive accent next to the first segol, there at the bottom of the kof. But the context also tells you. Givorei, the tseri yod, is all you really need because you know that's a construct. And you have a conjunctive accent with it. B'nai, the tseri yod, tells you that. But here you have something different. You don't have a conjunctive accent. You have the metheg, the secondary accent. And then you have a makef. And then kedar. And notice that kedar has the disjunctive accent on it. Tells you you've reached the end finally. Okay? You finally reached the end of it, the whole chain. Everyone clear on this? And there's all kinds of things that go on there. Notice that construct nouns aren't always constructed. There are some like keshet that refuse reconstruction or deconstruction and stand the same form. But all the others changed. Sha'ar changed, mispar changed, giborim changed, and banim changed. But keshet did not. All right, any other question there? Understand what's happening there. And the reason the translation is bowmen is literally keshet giborim, bow of the men, of the warriors, which would turn out to be bows, collective, bows of the men. So if they're bows of the men, these are men with bows, they're bowmen. Okay. All right. As we go across these and review them, the masculine and feminine, davar means what? Word, matter, affair, or thing. Torah means what? Law or instruction. Devar is word of. Torath is law of. Notice how the comet he on the end of feminine nouns changes to a pathic tau in the construct. And then divarim, the plural, masculine plural, changes when we get to the construct here. Torot is the feminine plural. In the construct, you divare instead of divarim, and you have torot, which is identical to the feminine. So you have two forms that don't change. That is, some of the masculine singular do not change, like keshet, like melech, those with segols in it, and then the feminine plural does not change. The feminine plurals just refuse change because you have a dominant vowel form on the ending of the feminine plural. Feminine singular changes from a to at. Masculine plural changes from im to a. The masculine singular, if it can, changes internally. Changes the vowels internally. Davar becomes devar. Questions? Everyone clear? All right, let's go to the next slide then. Look at melech. Notice what happens here. Melech does not change in the construct singular because it's a segolate noun. Those strong segols, just like keshet for bow. Milakim is kings. Malkei is kings of. Notice the im changes to a. The im changes to a. Isha, woman. Eshet, woman of. A very big change here. But notice the tau still shows up. The tau still shows up. Nashim, women. Remember, it's an irregular noun. It's a feminine noun, but it takes a masculine plural ending. Therefore, in the construct, it will take the masculine plural construct ending. Neshe. Notice the tsara yod. It's one of those things that when we open up the scriptures, in fact, maybe at the last part of class today, we'll just pull up a passage of scripture just out of nowhere, just at random, and have you look at the page. You can find these so easily. The masculine plural construct stand right out. They just leap off the page at you. It's one of those elements that you should always be able to recognize because that's tsara yod at the end of a word. Okay, now before we get to the personal pronouns, I need to clarify a few things on the assignments, the worksheets I just returned to you this morning, graded. There are two items that need discussion. The first item has to do with the very first part of that worksheet where a number of you, not all of you, but I would say at least half of you, lost some points because you did not remove the dagesh from the Begad Kafath letters at the beginning. Now, I believe that the only place you have the rules stated about Begad Kafath following the Shwa are clear back in the earlier chapters when we were talking about Begad Kafath letters and when they take the dagesh and when they don't take the dagesh. And that takes you way back into chapter 2, is it? Chapter 3. Way back in chapter 3 on page 31 where you have the Begad Kafath letters and where you have the description given of when they have the hardening dot and when they don't. And it is neither clear there nor is it clear at the beginning of the chapter with the prepositions and conjunction that when you have a Begad Kafath letter and you begin with a vocal schwa at the beginning of it, the Begad Kafath letter loses the dogish, because the dogish stays only if it is the beginning or start of a syllable. All right? Begad Kafaf letters retain the dogish only if they are at the beginning of a syllable. If you have a vocal schwa in front of it, it is not the beginning of the syllable. The syllable begins with the consonant that has the vocal schwa under it. So that's why the dogish disappears. All right, so it goes back to the former discussions we had about the vocal schwa and the discussions we had about begad kafaf letters and syllabification that goes on that. But unfortunately, and I looked at this, our examples, we didn't give a single example in the chapter on either conjunction or on the preposition that showed you a begad kafaf letter following it, so you could see that. But the dogish needs to disappear. Okay, the dogish has to disappear because, again, this rule is the dogish lene occurs in begad kafaf letters only when the begad kafaf letter begins a syllable or follows a closed syllable. All right? So that's what you have to go back to find that out. The other thing has to do with the translation that you were to do at the end of the exercise, where you were asked to say, according to the master. And when you do that, according to the master, many of you, in fact, I would say 90% of you, used Adonai. Adonai is a word that's reserved for the Lord himself, with a capital L. Adonai is not used of human beings. For a human master, it's Adon, this word. So it should have been Ka Adon. And the individual that was doing the grading had marked it wrong, and I wrote an okay, wrote an explanation, and did not count it wrong, because we had not talked about this in class. So according to the master with a lowercase m, not a capital M, or according to the Lord, lowercase l, not a capital L, is Adon, Ka Adon. If you want to say according to the Lord, meaning God himself, it's Adonai. Okay? Now there are a few cases in Scripture where Adon is used of God. It's a minority of situations. They're rare, but they do occur. And there again, context has to tell you that one. All right? Any questions beyond those? I want to make certain those two were clear. So we looked at them. All right? Let's talk about personal pronouns. Personal pronouns gets us into chapter 12. Personal pronouns are very, very important for you to understand and to memorize. If you know personal pronouns, you will know the verb forms. Why? Because the verb forms are inflected by using the personal pronouns as part of that inflection. They take a part of that pronoun and apply it to the verb. So if you know the pronouns, you know the verbs. You can identify them. It's one of these areas in Hebrew where you've got to learn it. It is absolutely necessary. If you don't learn personal pronouns, you will not learn the verb. If you don't learn the personal pronouns, you will have great difficulty understanding the verb. You must know personal pronouns. So as we begin these, when we look at them, we have person, number, and gender to deal with. First person is as I or we. Second person is you. And then third person is he, she, it, and they. So the first person singular, I, is, and get these all down here, we have them given as common gender for the first person. There's no masculine or feminine used in first person. They're all common. And the form of the personal pronoun in first common singular is ani, which is the most often occurring. It's a short form, or anoki. Okay, those are both personal pronouns. They're two different forms of the same word, and they have the same meaning. Both of these mean I, a capital I. Okay? When we go to the plural, first person common plural, we, it also has two forms. A nachnu, which is the long form, is the most popular, and nachnu, which is the shorter form and less popular. And then second masculine singular, you, with reference to an individual man. Ata, fully spelled with a comma te, is the most popular. I put the most popular on the right-hand side here always. And ata, without a he on the end, is an alternate spelling, pronounced the same. The feminine singular, you, when you're talking to a woman and speaking to her individually as you, that's at. At. All right? Let's pronounce these from top to bottom, from right to left, okay? Ani.
Ani.
Anoki.
Anoki.
Anachnu.
Anachnu.
Nachnu.
Nachnu.
Ata.
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 At.
At.
Again. Ani.
Ani.
Anoki.
Anoki.
Anachnu.
Anachnu.
Nachnu.
Nachnu.
Ata.
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 At.
At.
Now you'll notice there that when you're pronouncing ata, we had a vocabulary word today that had the exact same sound. It is a homonym. It is spelled differently and has a different meaning altogether. This ata is the word now. Pronounced the same. No distinction. But it is spelled differently. It has an ayin, not an aleph. It has an ayin, not an aleph. What is the first letter of 6 out of 7 of these personal pronouns? Aleph. That ought to help. All right? It ought to help in maintaining the distinction. You should never confuse ata with an ayin with ata with an aleph, because personal pronouns primarily here begin with the aleph. Let's pronounce them one more time. Ani.
Ani.
Anoki.
Anoki.
Anachnu.
Anachnu.
Nachnu.
Nachnu.
Ata.
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 At.
At.
Okay, what's the meaning of ani and anoki? I. Okay. What's the meaning of anachnu and nachnu? What's the meaning of ata and ata? You masculine singular. And at? You feminine singular. Let's go through that again. What's the meaning of ani, anoki?
I.
What's the meaning of a nachnu, nachnu?
We.
What's the meaning of ata, ata? And at? You feminine singular. Okay. Please remember these. Please memorize them. Make them such a part of your being that they become very natural to you. Okay? So let's move now to the second masculine plurals and the third singulars. The second masculine plural is atem. Everyone?
Atem.
The second feminine plural is atena.
Atena.
Or aten.
Aten.
The third masculine singular is who. And the third feminine singular is he.
He.
Remember, who is he is she, and me is who. All right? Chad.
On the second person feminine plural, the alternate form in the book is actually spelled attain. Is it attain or
You have, they both occur. They both occur. It can have a segol or it can have a tseri. And that depends on the writer, depends on what they've chosen, right? And so I've used both of them here. I think I'm trying to think which book it is. I think it's in the book of Ruth. When they don't use the aina ending, it becomes attain, tseri. And in the other books, it's normally the segol. But there's a difference. There's a variety of spellings. Okay, but that second form, that alternate form, is very rare. You're rarely going to see it. Yes, John?
This is just to satisfy
curiosity, but if the Masoretes are the guys that put the vowels in, why would it matter what book it was?
Because you have books written in different periods of history of the language, and they reflect the current dialect of the time and the pronunciation of the time. Also, in some books, you have to look at them and say, okay, is it the book, is it the narrative form, the narrator, or is it in conversation? Because the conversations also show something. When Ruth speaks, she's speaking Hebrew as a second language. She's speaking as a Moabitess. She's from Moab. You have the native speakers are Boaz and Naomi, and their language differs. And so the reason you have differences is, first of all, because of regional dialects. And second of all, you have also gender distinctions, gender differences between who's speaking, and age differences between who's speaking, class differences between who's speaking, whether they're poor people or kings. And then you have historical periods that have various pronunciations that are used. Like in English, some of you say, my Aunt Barbara. The rest of us say, my Aunt Barbara. We're saying the same word. Why the distinction? It's a regional distinction mostly, but in some cases it's not regional, it's societal, it's a class distinction. There are certain people that regardless of the region they live in, insist on saying aunt because that is considered to be the higher, more proper, sophisticated way of saying the word. We have the same problem in Hebrew. Variety of pronunciations due to those situations. And the book of Ruth, you have a certain period of time reflected, and if it's in conversation, you have different types of conversations going on. All right? Yes, Scott.
Do the second plurals and third persons have the same importance as far as our memorization works?
Do the second plurals?
The ones you've just gone over?
All the personal pronouns must be memorized. Both the first slide and the second slide. I just can't get them all on one slide without making them too small. But all of these are required. I think there are going to be a total of 3 slides. So all of these. Okay? All right, let's pronounce these again. Atem. Atena. Aten. Who. He. Okay, atem means what? You, masculine plural. Atena. You, feminine plural. Aten. You, feminine plural. Attain. You, feminine plural. So whether it's atena, aten, or attain. Now note very clearly, the masculine has the meme on the end. The feminine has the noon on the end. All right? Masculine, M. We had what? Masculine plural ends in what of the nouns? Im, right? Cherubim, seraphim, devarim. All right? Masculine, plural. So in the pronoun, we have the same phenomenon. You have atem, the meme. The noon is more feminine. And so you have atena, and you have aten, or attain. Okay? Who means what? And he means? No. She. All right? Who is he? He is she. What is who? Me. Right. Okay, who's on first? All right. Now let's go to the third plural. This slide is equally required for Scott's benefit. All right, third masculine plural. They, hema. Hame. Notice the mame on the end for the masculine, the feminine. Haina. Hain. Okay, and one of the students pointed out, oh, that's easy to remember. Hen. A hen is a female chicken. So, haina, hain. All right? But notice again the distinction. Mame for the masculine, noon for the feminine. Mame for the masculine, noon for the feminine, just as a memory device. I don't know about you, but I can use all the memory devices I can possibly garner together to help me. And the older I get, the more memory devices I have to employ. All right? Pretty soon I'll be walking to class with things tied all over my fingers and things written on the back of my hands to help me remember things. And that's about the time I better quit teaching. All right? Hema means what? They. Masculine they. Haim? Masculine they. Haina? They, feminine. Hain? They, feminine. All right? Questions? Questions?
So for
Chat.
the personal pronouns in the second and third person, there's no common form, you just use a masculine if it's a mixed group?
If it's a mixed group, you always use masculine. And that has to do with second person, has to do with third person, has to do with verbs, has to do with a lot of things. Correct. All right? Anyone else? So if you walk into a room and it's half women and half men, or you have maybe two of your wives are visiting class and I walk in, I may not say givreen at the end because givreen means gentleman. But I'll still say, Ma shlom kem, how are you? Because even the women are present, you always use the masculine for mixed group. Or if there are 90% women and a few men, you'll still use the masculine. Unless you want to pointedly eliminate the men and refer only to the women. Then you will use the feminine. The interesting thing is, you can insult men in the Hebrew language. You cannot insult women in the Hebrew language. All right? Unless they're really super sensitive feminist activists. And then they object to the fact that Elohim is a masculine plural, all right, for the name for God. So that, but as far as the Hebrew is concerned in the Hebrew culture, they expect the masculine to be used of a group that's mixed. Unless someone is intentionally wanting to not mention the men or intentionally referring in that way. And if you wanted to intentionally refer to the men and not the women present, you'd have to do more than just use a masculine form of pronoun. You'd have to use some other terms in which you are limiting it exactly that way, like using givreen. If there are 3 or 4 women, or even 90 women in here, and I walk in and say, Boker Tov Givreen, it's obvious I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to only the men, because I said givreen. Okay? Other questions? Yes, Scott.
Regarding the second person singular and the comments hey at the end,
Yes.
that seems a little contrary to genders. Or...
Don't get too caught up in comments Hayes always referring to feminine. All right. Yes. Jean-Denis.
When these pronouns can be used as complement or subject?
When can nouns be used as pronouns?
These personal pronouns.
Pronouns can be used at any time as a subject.
Yeah, and as complement too?
Yes.
Okay.
Anytime.
Okay, but now sometimes we find them as appears in verbs or nouns as suffixes.
Correct. They can still be used in addition to that.
So even if it is suffixes, so it still can be complement or subject.
Correct. Okay? All right, and that's beyond where these guys are. All right? You're in 603, talking third semester. These fellows are only first semester Hebrew. So we don't want to confuse them with that. All right? Any questions on these personal pronouns, other than the fact, remember, you have to memorize these. John? John? Or not John, Eric. Excuse me.
These ones on the board here, aim and aim.
Yes.
Chapter 9, they're also translated as does, so should we just memorize both of these? Or?
When you deal with them later, they are also used for demonstrative pronouns. Okay? Remember that the third person pronouns, personal pronouns, are the same forms used for the demonstrative pronouns, the remote demonstratives, that and those. But don't confuse them. When I ask for personal pronouns, don't give me that and those. When I ask for demonstrative pronouns, you can give me that and those. Okay? But yes, they are the exact same forms. All right? Anyone else? Okay, let's go over this one more time on the pronunciations of all of these. And again, I can't say this strongly enough. If you do not learn the personal pronouns, you will sink beneath the water when it comes to the verbs. You must understand the personal pronouns. There's certain things in Hebrew that if you understand, it opens the door to understanding a host of other issues and things later. And this is one of them. It is very important. It is possible to put everything you need to know about biblical Hebrew to read the Hebrew Bible on the front and back of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It's possible to teach it to a 7-year-old in one 24-hour period. None of you are 7-year-olds, so it's going to take a lot longer. All right? But this is one of those things that has to go on that sheet of paper. You can take the entire textbook and summarize it down into front and back of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and what you need to know. This is one of those things. You must know. How many times have I said that? Enough? I'll say it more, okay? I will refuse to give up on it because this is very important. So memorize it. Go home and memorize it, all right? Ani, Anoki, Anachnu, Nachnu, Ata, At, Atem, Atena, Aten, Who, He, Hema, Haim, Hena, Hain. All right, we've got them. You've got them. All right, let's go to the exercises for today. All right, exercise 10. You're to translate the following Hebrew phrases and sentences into smooth English. We went over that briefly before, so let's start. Number 1, wasus casus. Kenny. And a horse like the horse. And a horse like the horse, or and a horse is like the horse. Both are acceptable. You must have the horse. Notice the pathak under the kaf and the dagesh in the samik.
Can they switch the phrases like the horse and the horse?
You can switch it, but try not to do too much switching when you're doing these translations because you can end up messing up the meaning. Okay? I'll accept it this time. All right? Number 2, kasus bamidbar. Kyle.
Like the horse in the wilderness.
Correct. Like the horse, pathek, dagish in the samik, in the, pathek under the baith, dagish in the maim, in the wilderness. Like the horse in the wilderness, as the horse in the wilderness. Number 3, ha'ir hagedolah, Kempis.
The good city?
Not the good city, that'd be ha'ir hatova. Scott Jackson.
Great city?
The great city. The great city. Number 4, Wehakohen Hagadol, Scott Basolo.
And the great priest.
And the great priest. Did anyone say and the high priest? If you did, that's correct. The word high priest in the Hebrew uses gadol. It's the great priest is what the high priest is called. So both of those are acceptable. El Eretz Tova, Dennis. Toward a good land, unto a good land, to a good land. All right? To a good earth, I will accept. You can use earth.
To good land would be okay too, right?
To good land. Yes, I'll accept it. It's not too smooth in English, but I'll accept it. Okay, number 6. Migoy Gadol. David.
Who is a great nation?
Who is a great nation? Who is a great nation? Is supplied because you have a question with me.
Can you just do whose great nation?
Whose great nation? No.
What is a great nation?
Because to be whose great nation, you have to have another relationship there. It can't be what, because me is the personal interrogative. Who? Yes.
Whose nation is great?
Who? Well, that's basically the same question Jeff is asking. I'm saying the whose is not necessarily correct here. I will allow it this time because I think in our vocabulary we gave you whose, whom, and who. But normally whose will be in a little bit different situation than this. Okay, but we'll allow it. Okay, number 7, Gadol Yahweh. James Lee.
Yahweh is great.
Yahweh is great. Notice Gadol has no article and precedes its predicate adjective. Yahweh is definite. Number 8. Ha'am amer tov hadavar. Kelly.
The people said the word is good.
Good. Very good. The people said the word is good. Jeff?
Number 7, should we always use Yahweh instead of translating any words?
If you use the Lord, that's fine. You can use Yahweh or you can use YHWH.
You want us to switch to Yahweh for future tense?
You can use anyone, just as long as it's correctly spelled, not lowercase O-R-D. Okay? All right, number 9, very quickly, and then we'll go to chapel. Tov bara ora betov. All right, Roger.
Good with bad, and bad with good.
Good or bad with good. O is or. Good with bad or bad with good. Or good by bad or bad by good. Or good in bad or bad in good. Kyle.
Should there be anything circled on that?
Yes, there should be. I think, let's see here, you have circle all attributive adjectives. No, actually, because these are all being used as substantives. They're not attributed to anything. You don't have anything stated there. All right, so there'd be no circles.